So I'm quite happy to slam these two bits together. So there is just one area where I get the tiniest of gaps, a hairline gap. So we're going to start at the top here, above the canopy. Just run some glue in and pinch it together. And if I hold the tail, and do the rest of that seam. So that's that first join put together. While that's bonding, we'll just do the back of the tail there. Just that upper part. And then we can close the nose together. Now this is where I've got the hairline gap, so I'm holding it together at the exhaust outlets. I can't get that to go together any more than it is, so we're just going to pinch it close so it's as tight as possible. I don't want to squeeze too hard because I don't want any molten plastic coming out. So just enough for them to hold together. I'll give that a sec while it just flashes off. Grabs so quickly, this liquid glue, it's just ideal for most jobs really, where you've got a good fit. And then we can come back and just do this rear area. This will all get covered up, but if we get it fitting correctly at this stage, then we won't have a problem at a later stage. So then the last thing to do once you've got those halves together is just run some glue on the inside of the bulkhead and the dashboard there, just to add some extra strength, and it keeps this from flapping about. I can see light coming through just that section there. So a little bit of filler, 2-second job to sort out. Otherwise, that is really good. Now ready to put these two parts together then. I'm not going to clean either the wings or the body up until I've got everything sort of assembled. We've got some other bits to put underneath as well. So we're just going to put that into place first. Right, so that needs to be aligned for these two parts to come together. There we go. That is a lovely tight fit. That is just lovely. Okay, let's get some glue in there. I'm going to start at the back of the join with the wing. And it's right on a panel line, so that's just really lovely, that. And we'll work up and do the next section. Now I have a little bit of a gap there, but it just pinches together, which is why I did the back first, because when you pinch that together it forces the back out a little bit, so I wanted the back in place first. So we'll come and do the back of this side and then give that a chance to harden off a little bit. The gap is not so bad on this side like it is on that side. So I'll do this side first. Just hold that in place. Just get to the inside there, so I'm just going to put some more on the inside to make sure we've got a good bond there. Tail assembly is next, and these tail fins come in two halves that need to be put together, which I have already done. And you can't put them in the wrong way around, so don't worry about that. So I'm just going to test fit them now. That's actually a really tight fit. Let's see if that one is the same. Yes, it is. Okay. So we can easily glue them in place. Have to say that this model is going together like a dream in the main. No issues whatsoever. Just put a bit too much on there. Okay, and then we have an assembly at the back, which is this little part here, which is going to hold these in place. So we need to clean up the parts for that, and then I'll come back to it. This part's going to be quite delicate because it's just this little small diameter, 1.5 millimeter rod that's holding the part together. Once you remove this bit of sprue gate, you can feel the part's going to be flimsy. So really careful on the cleanup of this. Some nice detail on this tail, though we do need to remove some of it for the Edward edge. So let's have a look at that. So the the Edward etch is going to want to remove these little points here. So what I'm going to do is just mark them out with a pencil, so I know where they were. I'll just nip them off. Obviously we'll have to sand it flush, but we'll get to that in the fullness of time. Cleaned up this part, and actually it was a bit stronger than it looked, but still a bit of care was needed. And how this works is this now places onto your tail, and then this part holds it in place. So you can make this posable with a little bit of fiddling. But it does, it works, it absolutely works, but I think I'm going to glue mine in the position I want first, and then we'll add this piece after, I think is my thought process. So what I'm going to do is just glue it at this point initially, and then where the hinge is, don't want to fill any gaps, you see. We're really just tacking it in place, that's all it needs. Okay, that's looking good. So our next task is to clean this up so it can go into there. So my tail plane is cleaned up now, and we've sanded down the area where we cut those two little points off that we're going to replace with some etch. And the next thing naturally would be to just put that in place, and the fit is superb. But now we have that dry, let's see if we can get the light better. There is a small gap in the part that we've just put in. It's going to need a little bit of clean up, and what I don't want to do is damage that. So for now, until we clean up the whole aircraft, that's going to get left off, and we'll put it on after clean up. So the next part that we need to put together is the air intake, which comes with 3 parts. Now I have some very nice etch to put on there. So I want to, before we build this up, we need to sand these front surfaces totally flat, because we'll put etch over. When we're part way through the painting, we'll add those. So first thing to do is to clean them up, which is a job for a file. Quite a lot of material to take out of this, really. So a file, if you think of it as roughing and taking out the bulk of the material first, a file makes light work of that. Then I'm using ultimately less coarse, but quite a coarse emery board, just to level it all off. Right, so it is a very fine wire detail on this, which would look absolutely lovely under paint, but the photo etch looks so nice that I don't want to miss it. And then we're going to go with a fine emery board. And what we'll be ending up doing is painting this flat surface in gunmetal, and then painting the photo etch mesh, the colour of the underside of the aircraft, which will be blue, and then after painting the mesh blue, attaching it, and that should look pretty good. Sandings up. Okay, so that's that part cleaned up, and we can. Now you can't go wrong with fitting these because they make the tab system so that one only fits in the one place. You can't get it wrong. They're actually slightly different lengths. The front one being slightly wider. So fit of that is absolutely beautiful. So we'll just glue that in place. That's the first one in. I'll sort the second one out and then get back to you. Our next part on is the underside of the fuselage that fits in the tail. Now, I think when I put this on, I've not quite got it square somehow. So I'm going to try and readjust this, and then we'll add the tail plane on. Because as I align it, I've got a gap, but I don't believe is the kit engineering. I believe that is my shoddy building. So let me try and sort that out, and then we'll have a look at how that fits. Okay, so we've sorted that issue, which was simply I hadn't held that area down in place long enough. So a little bit of liquid glue just to soften up the joint again, and a bit of pressure just popped it back where it needed to be. So when I put this part in now, just clicks into place and everything lines up nicely, he says. So fits really good, and one of the key things to point out here is this part on the tail that we put in is slightly deeper than this part, so you get a little step here. Don't be tempted to sand that off, because there is actually a step in this part to allow for it. So well, it's always important to dry fit before you do anything, but yeah, that all aligns nicely. So we're going to glue that in now. Then our next piece is to fit into the underside of the nose here. So I'm just going to test fit that first and check the fit, which is pretty much perfect. It just drops into place there. That's lovely. Well, whilst it's in there, we might as well get some paint on it. Glue even. The wings. So we have these, the ailerons, flaps, whatever they are. I'm no aircraft expert, And again, they just slot in beautifully, so you can multiple position them as well, but obviously we've gone with straight for the tail, so we need to do that with the wings. Nice and easy. There's a nice gap at each end, which looks about right. All looks good. So with all this assembled now, we can put the air scoop on at the front, the radiators here or whatever they are. Right, so we can now put this air scoop on the front here. So it has two location slots which are different sizes, so you can't orientate it the wrong way around. I don't think you would anyway, but that just clicks into place with a nice reassuring click, and again, fit is brilliant. So we're just going to run some glue into that. There is some parts that go into here. There's a couple, there's like a flap and a couple of supports for it. We're going to paint them separately and add them in later, so we're not going to build them up just yet, because we'll paint this with the underside, and then it allows us to get into the grill with the photo etch later on. So for now, we're going to leave that as is. And the same is true of the part that goes in the front here. So there's a part here which is the actual sort of scoop that goes on the front. What we'll do is we'll clean that up, but we won't put it on as yet. So I'm just dry fitting this part, and they've put the panel line as the joint, so that's really helpful. It means that we can paint that separately in the blue when we paint the rest of the aircraft, and then glue that in after we've added the grill, the photo etch grill, and before we do anything else, varnishes or weathering or whatever we might be doing to this as yet. So that's really helpful actually. The part fits really nicely. It's not going to leave us with a gap to fill, so shouldn't cause us any problems. So that gets left to one side as sort of like a sub-assembly. So the next thing we need to build up is the air scoop that goes on the front here. So we've got our two halves off the sprue and cleaned up. I'm just test fitting them. So it goes together reasonably well at the front, but I can't get the back end to join together, which I think is probably the location pin causing that. So I'm going to remove the location pin, see if that improves the fit any. When you have location pins and a gap in the same place, it's always a good guess that that might be the issue. So that's always where I start at least. I'm leaving the forward one in. Lining up the panel line there on the top. Yeah, and straight away you can see I can now close that fully. So that's great. We are going to have a gap. You can see there, a bit of a gap. But even if I'm painting that black, that's going to cause me an issue. So I'm thinking about opening that up and creating a full hole and then just painting the inside black. I think that might look quite good. And then see how it looks when it's fitted. We've got a little sort of V cut out at the front where it's been moulded. And most of that gets hidden when it's fitted into place, but not all of it. So we need to do some cleanup of this part before we actually fit it to the model. So let's start by cutting out these ends at the front here. So my next task is to add this little air scoop that goes on the front of the aircraft here, and the fit fits against this little step here, so you get the position right. There's a little bit of sidewards slop, so you're going to have to position it carefully by eye and make sure everything's straight. Just going to tack it in and we'll have a moment to adjust it if we need to. That looks good. Okay, so my next task is to just go around the aircraft, make sure that everything's nice and smooth, fill any gaps. I've already started here on the top here. We've got a small gap there, and just make sure everything is right. We had a little bit of sink there that we need to just finish sanding smooth, and get this ready for painting is the next job. So we're going to clean up all the seams, and then we'll have a look at what we're going to do next. Right, so I have been round and tidied up my join seams, and I think I have everything where I need it to be. So ultimately what we're trying to do at this stage is get the model to a point where we can put a first prime on it, which will help us identify any further cleanup that might need to be done, and then we can get it into paints. That's the ultimate goal here. Because we've done some cleanup, we have lost some of the panel lines on some of the join edges. So I'm just going to use a razor saw to put those back in. And it's a very simple process of just retracing the original panel line using the finest of the saw edges. And that removes any filler that might be in places that we don't want it. And where we've sanded them out, we can just trace them back in. And that way, when we put it under paint, it all looks as it should do. then when I've gone round with the razor saw, I just like to go in with the thin tip of a scraper and just get any rough edges of debris out, so we've got a nice crisp line. It's a little time consuming, but it's absolutely worth the effort. As you can see, it makes such a big difference, so it is something you need to do. Right, I'll get this done and then I'll get back to you. Okay, my Hurricane is ready to go in terms of painting the fuselage as far as we can take it. What I want to do though is get some other parts prepped for painting at the same time that are going to be the same colour. So the undercarriage here, for example. Now what I am going to do is, we'll do this while we're talking, is just have a look and see the fit of the undercarriage when it's up. Now I'm going to be modelling it with the undercarriage down, but I'm just interested to see if we can use the parts for the retracted undercarriage as part of the paint masking. If we can just push them into place, then that might be useful for us. Yeah, we might be able to use those as part of our paint masking, which would be handy. We can put some sponge in these big recesses, and that's, yeah, we can put some temporary glue in just to tack it in place, I think. Yeah, so we will do that. So we're going to put those parts in just to help with the masking, but obviously we'll come to masking in a minute. So I need to clean up these parts. I also want to put in the glass lenses in the wings here. I'm not going to put those in. We'll put those glass parts in after painting, but obviously we need to mask this area, so putting the glazing in and masking the glazing off is clearly the best way forward there. And then we need to think about what we're doing with the cockpit. Now I'm going to have the cockpit closed, but the fit of the cockpit isn't wonderful, in as much as you'll see it sort of wants to spring back on you all the time. It's not wide, and the part is not wide enough at the bottom, so it just doesn't want to fit down. So I don't think I can use this for masking really. You've got to sort of glue it into place, and the problem with gluing it into place, of course, is you've got a section of the fuselage underneath the glass that you then can't paint. So we're going to have to think about something different for that. We've also got to mask the gun openings there. Now we might have one or two more parts to put on this. So we've got the aerial there, we've got probably some photo etch. We're going to go through all of that in a moment, but what I want to do is prep all my plastic parts first. So we'll get these prepped, and then that's another sprue done. I always think it's quite interesting to have a go at fitting your undercarriage parts, just to see if they would actually fit in the opening. So telltale sign of how good quality the design is. So I've often found that you wouldn't get them to raise up, that they're oversized or different in some way. So I always find, I'm just out of interest, it's just a bit of fun really. Okay, so let's see, shall we? The answer is, yeah, it would. Absolutely would. Sign of good design. Right, I'll get these cleaned up and then we'll be back in a mo. So in terms of the kit parts, this is all we've got left to work through, to be honest. And in terms of what I'm going to get in the way of leftovers that we'll put in our spares box, I've got a nice pilot, which I've chosen not to use this time. We've got a different style of spinner and its backing plate and an arrestor hook. So we'll keep hold of those, they're always handy items. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean all of these parts up now, with the possible exception of these, which are quite delicate, and I can brush paint those when I come to fit them, so I might not clean those up, but everything else is going to get cleaned up. There are some items like those there that need to be fitted before we paint, but everything else can be cleaned up ready for different paint processes. So as this is drying, we can be painting other parts is the general plan. So yep, I'll get on and get those parts cleaned up and get back to you when we are ready to start masking. Right then, this is the remainder of our plastic parts required to complete the construction, at least, of this model. And what I've got here is two separate piles. I've got a small pile of items that need to go onto our fuselage before we paint it, and then all of these I want to paint so that we can then assemble them afterwards. Now all of these parts need cleaning up and preparing, so some of them don't need anything as of yet, and others need a bit of assembly, and some just need cleaning up. But what we're going to do is get all of that out of the way now, so that when paint's drying on the fuselage I can be painting other bits and we can rattle through it a little bit. So let's crack on with that. So all our parts are now cleaned up as far as I can get them, and everything is ready for priming and painting. So we've got the main aircraft there, we need to do some masking on. Everything else pretty much can be primed as is and then painted up. I do have masks for these, but I don't think I need them. I'll be hand painting those, brush painting those anyway. So we are finished with the mask set. So we have one or two things that are different colours, but in the main there are items here that we can paint at the same time as we paint this. And then we'll have a look at what we're going to do next, whether we're going to pre-shade or not. And I think in terms of solid colours, we will paint the blue underside first. Then we've got to think about the silver paintwork on the underside of the nose and the wing edges, and whether we do that before or after we do the upper camouflage. So lots to be thinking about. Just going to put the lenses in for the wing lights. Just need to check orientation because they have a particular way of going in, and then we will need to mask them. And I'm going to use the ultra glue to put them in. Okay. That's the first one in, looking good. I have to say that the wing lights look really good on this model. The giving you the lenses in clear so we could paint the back of them and make them shine really works well. Go. That's already popped in, so that's nothing to worry about. That is our wing lenses on, so we just need them to dry and then we can mask them up when we do the masking of all the other components. So this is the base of the box that my Tropical Hurricane came in, and as you can see, I can lie that my model as it is in progress on the box. Now what we can do is make a little jig that's going to stop this moving around while we're working on it. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rest the aircraft on the box, and I'm just going to cut either side of the wings, and then do the same either side of the rear of the fuselage there. Take that out of the way, and all we're doing is cutting the box down a little bit and then folding down where we've cut. Let's cut that one a bit deeper. Like so, and then we have an improvised aircraft jig. That's going to allow me to do everything I want to do on the top side, and also on the underside. Total cost, 0. So we have some masking to do. Going to start with the wing lights, and we do have some little masking squares on the Edward masking set that will cover this off. Okay, get my orientation correct. Now I think these one goes in at the top and one goes in at the bottom, and they overlap, I think is the idea. So we'll do the two top ones first. Okay, that is the lights masked off. Next thing we want to do is mask off the underside of this. So I'm using the raised undercarriage parts to help me mask this area, and then we're going to just put some sponge in. Hopefully that one's staying in place nicely, this one's loose and keeps coming out, so I'm hoping that just popping a little bit of sponge in there is going to just help hold that in place. This is just washing up sponge that we cut bits off as we need. Right, actually that's causing me more problems, so we'll take those out and recycle. And looking on the paint instructions, the inside of that is actually blue, which I hadn't noticed. I don't know whether that's incorrect or not, but I'm going to leave mine as silver, I think. Not happy with that one, so I'm going to change it for something a little. This sponge is just a little bit firmer, so I'll just cut a piece off of this one. Okay, that is my undercarriage masked off. I think I'm happy with that. And then we are going to mask off this area up here. So we've got two areas to mask. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to try this and see if this works. It's probably too big, but we'll see. I think that might work. I'm just going to cut some small pieces just to go into these little side pods here. Right. So let's have a look at this cockpit. So I'm going to start by putting a little piece of tape in the front just to cover those little internal areas where sponge just ain't going to cut it. And we're going to do the same with this up here. I think that's not quite got enough adhesive left. I think I've reused that about 3 times, so that's fair enough. We'll get some. So I plan to use 2 different primers on this. The reason being, we have this sort of aluminium strip on the leading edges of the wings, around the nose ring there, and then when we flip underneath, again the leading edges, and this area here is all in aluminium. So I want that to really pop out a little bit, so we're going to do a gloss black primer on that area before we do any masking and so on. And then for the rest of it, I think we're going to do a flat black. And the reason why I'm using a flat black is because I'm already using a black at the front, so I don't want there to be I don't want it to stand out as a tonal difference where we have the shape of the camouflage. So if I do a gloss black and a flat black, the base is the same, even though one of them's gloss. But in terms of colour saturation, when we put the paint down, it's going to be the same. If that makes sense. So what that means is that this blue will probably come out ever so slightly darker than it would have done if we'd put it on a grey. It also means we're not going to do any pre-shading particularly, but that's not what the effect I'm after on this one. We're going to do some other fun stuff with this instead. And I think what we're going to do is start by doing the underside, prime it, put the azure blue down, and then we can mask and do the silver afterwards. I think that's my thought process. Do the silver last. I think that will make sense. Get out our other parts that need to be painted in the azure blue, and we'll do all of those at the same time. So we've got undercarriage parts, we've got the front of the air scoop there, and we've got the back end of the air scoop as well, which is that part there. The tail wheel also needs to be azure blue. We've got the little foot stirrup. We want to paint that edge blue effectively. The rest of it I think would be aluminium. And then we've got the little, I think it's a pitot tube, isn't it, that's underneath. So we need to paint that at the same time. In fact, we're probably at the point where we can glue that on first. So we'll do that before we paint, and then that's one less task then, isn't it? So that part there also needs to be painted. So as we've now got a way of handling the model, we can glue that on. So we'll do that next job. And I think that is it then for the blue components. So yeah.